And what he's doing is he's building up, um, I guess he's creating the weapon that he's going to use. And when you listen to this, I almost broke out crying when I'm listening to him talk about this because, I have a lot of love for my own mom. I think about the sort of stuff that she did for me. And, my father died when I was 13 and my mom was left alone. And she went through a great deal of pain. And it was just very difficult so you can see how you can very easily convey emotion by the way that you talk, the way that you pause, the way that you breathe. And if you listen to that section, he's casting a spell by how he talks. He's casting a spell by the way that he pauses. And this is the first time in the talk where he really plays that emotional body language, that emotional vocal language that can be affected. I'm not a very good actor. I tried to do it just now, but there, people who are really effective at this tend to be the most effective speakers because they connect with their audience. Those are the people then that get elevated to higher positions in the church because people see, these people are really spiritual, because that being able to manipulate that type of emotional response is what makes you an effective speaker. And so there's a form of evolution that happens as you get up in the hierarchy. The people who are able to affect a tearful articulation of an emotionally appealing message are going to be seen as the most spiritual, and so they're going to be promoted in the system. And when you think about people like Holand, who gives great speeches, and he uses a lot of literary references, and he uses a lot of very educated, sophisticated prose techniques and everything that that's what his education is in at Yale, and so you expect that. And then you have someone like Eyring, who's able to convey just such intense emotion, seemingly at the drop of a hat. I mean, he cries in almost every single talk. Mm-hmm. And if you pay attention to him, you'll see that he'll have a very tearful paragraph, and then the next paragraph is back to normal again. Right. And so it's very possible, for people to become skilled at doing that. Right. And I just want, as we watch this, just pay attention to the way that he breathes, the way that he talks, because when he talks about critically emotional things, how we feel about our parents, how we feel about our mother, that's when you start to get this kicked in. And he does the same thing when he talks about the Savior.
Mm-hmm. And also they define, it's like a cycle. So they define the traits of spirituality, and then they promote people who fit those traits. And then we see the example, which they basically can, if spirituality is defined in different religious systems differently. In various Eastern religions, it might be to say as little as possible.
Very slowly.
Yeah, or to not even think so highly of yourself that you would stand on a podium and talk to anyone at all. A lot of people live very spiritual lives, just going through their life and helping those people they encounter and not really having much to say at all. Other people define spirituality, holy rollers. The louder you are, the more you can shake your body and speak in tongues, that's spirituality. And so,
so the people who are really adept at that, of conveying the spirituality that fits in the culture, will tend to be elevated within the culture and take more of a prominent position.
Yeah, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're actually more spiritual, or they might be more spiritual, but in that particular kind of spirituality. Again, for some reason, I'm thinking of Corinthians 12. It talks about spiritual gifts and how there are lots of different ones. So Mormonism promotes these very speechifying types of spirituality and getting a little tear in your eye and that sort of thing. But that's not all there is. So.
Yeah. All right, let's keep going.
With the elegance of that letter echoing in our minds, let me share 3 experiences reflecting the majestic influence of mothers witnessed in my ministry in just the past few weeks.
Okay, there's a little bit of bravado there where he's going to talk about 3 really, emotionally appealing stories, but it's just in the past 3 weeks. And he clearly, this talk he just put together last night. So it gives us kind of an awe of him as an individual, as an apostle, that he's kind of playing to the audience for there. Let's keep.
Good point.
My first account is a cautionary one, reminding us that not every maternal effort has a storybook ending, at least not immediately. That reminder stems from my conversation with a beloved friend of more than 50 years who was dying away from the church he knew in his heart to be true.
Okay,
Did he
so
really? No one is, I don't know if he really knew in his heart. There's a
that's the thing is,
protagonist.
how does he
Holand is the
know?
protagonist.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like the narrator of a story who is omniscient.
Mhm.
You know, they're able to tell the inner dialogue of the people, of the characters in the story because they're the narrator of the story. Well, if he's dealing with a man who is apart from the church and didn't join the church, it is very almost insulting for him to then. It's kind of like baptizing Jews who died in the Holocaust. You know, he's co-opting this man's story and using it, reframing it so that it supports the church's narrative.
Yeah, and that's pretty typical of deathbed stories. You know, name a prominent atheist or deist, and they always supposedly recanted on the deathbed. Thomas Paine, apocryphally, was said to have converted to Christianity right on his deathbed. Christopher Hitchens hasn't been gone for what, 2 or 3 years now, and I've already heard apocryphal stories that he converted, you know, right as he was dying. No, Christopher Hitchens is not convert. Yeah, so it's this sort of unwillingness to listen and to project. We need our worldview to be true so much that he must have known deep down inside that the church was true, because you can't imagine any other way of thinking. So.
All right, let's see where he goes.
No matter how much I tried to comfort him, I could not seem to bring him peace. Finally, he leveled with me. Jeff, he said, however painful it is going to be for me to stand before God, I cannot bear the thought of standing before my mother. The gospel and her children meant everything to her. I have broken her heart, and that is breaking mine.
So I want to talk a little bit about the framework of what he's talking about there. The reason that Mormon mothers who have children who leave the church feel so heartbroken about it is because they are placed in this system where the only value that they are able to see in the choices that their children make are as if they conform to the church's expectations in their lives in terms of obedience and deference and participation. If the church instead had a narrative that was more accepting and inclusive and validating of the individual choices of a person, if they were separate from the church, then her mother would have no reason to have her heart be broken.
Yeah, and that's I have some notes I keep looking at here, and what you have in the church is a society where children are seen as extensions of their parents, and it's taught both to the children and to the parents that if the gospel works well for the parents, then it must work well for the children, and the children become indebted to following their parents' journey simply for existing. They aren't allowed to be their own person.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
And so, and again, he's using this emotional delivery where his voice wavers and it's called the almost cry as he's talking. And he does it just as he's talking about, you know, the guy standing before his mother and breaking her heart. And this idea of breaking your mother, you know, it's so universally seen as like this bad thing. So we even sing about it on the playground. We say, "Don't step on a crack, or you'll break your mother's back." You know, this way to manipulate people is out there. And so when you start seeing people, it should raise a red flag, no matter where you are.
Yeah, and he's also inducing shame here. It's not just guilt in the sense that it's how this person feels in general in his own isolation, but how he feels relative to the people around him, specifically his mother. It's a way of saying, wouldn't your mother be ashamed of you if she knew
Yes.
that you didn't follow in her footsteps? And it's also a really good example of how boundaries get so messed up in LDS culture. I've heard the accusation, that LDS culture is its own thing that sort of must spontaneously grow out of nothing. But no, I can trace these roots back to specific things like this talk. This talk is indicating that there are emotional pressures that you have to submit to for the sake of the emotional comfort of other people, specifically your mother. That I have to sacrifice all of who I am in order for my mother to feel okay about me. And you can't have boundaries in that situation. I can't be my own person in that situation.